My name is Jürgen Thomas. I'm the first one mentioned here. Obviously not native English speaker, I see here on my dialect. And Meir Orish.
So Matthew Ordish, I lead our Center of Excellence for the Americas. Again, not an English speaker, but on American. So we've got two foreigners to stand on stage and present to you today.
Yep. Okay, so let's dive right into it. SAP on Azure. We certified like 4 years ago with SAP workload on Azure. Large act to get these certifications together with SAP, but we were pretty successful. Today, we are seeing a huge momentum of SAP customers of all sizes, very important, of all sizes, moving SAP workload, SAP systems, whole SAP landscapes into Azure. Partners, we have many partners from global SIs like Accenture, like all the SIs you see here, up to very small partners who made a huge business out of moving SAP workload into Azure. Also, when we look through the customers, hundreds of customers that do run SAP workload in Azure, we are looking in all the industries. Very surprising sometimes for us that are even that the industries that we look at are even very restricted industries in terms of compliance and security. So, also one thing to mention when we look at it, a lot of the SAP customers that we see moving into Azure are not moving HANA into Azure or only HANA into Azure. When we look at the SAP customers that move SAP systems into Azure, then we see a lot with the traditional databases, the Oracle database, SQL Server database, even DB2, that they move into Azure with their existing business systems on NetWeaver. Matt, any comments from your side on that?
Yeah, is the next slide that up is the journey slide? Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's the one thing that we have a look at here, and we've actually got some great examples of customers that have started this journey. I was talking to one, the Mosaic company, which was one of the first companies we moved from on-premise that made a bet 3.5 years ago to move into Azure. Now, when they did it, it was like they were looked at as kind of crazy. Today, every conversation we're having is not if I should go to cloud, but how do I go to cloud? And it is a journey. It's not about just going on, hey, it's about S4. And so what we see here is very much the pattern of that journey. And we, as we've announced today, and we have done over the last few years, we hope to be able to give you every combination of that. So whether it's an OSDB combination or the sizes that we have available in HANA, we give you that ability for that choice. So it's really about, look, we see some customers that are have already moved to HANA, but are now closing data centers or have older hardware, and so that's the inflection point to move or the trigger point to move. We have others that have done part of BW, so we move BW, but we're running Suite on HANA, and we have others that are looking at S4. Now, certainly, as S4 matures, we're seeing that come up. We saw an initial push on that, and then a lot of people, and maybe your experiences, pushed back and said it's not quite ready. I can't replace my core system today. But as that has evolved, the strategy that we're seeing is we're seeing more Suite on HANA appear, or conventional NEDB as a path and a journey, and then people implementing the S4 Greenfield as part of that. And this is all really to set us up, and we'll discuss about what do we do next. Once we have it there, what is the path after that?
Yeah. What we also see is a lot of customers that have multiple of those motions, that fill multiple of the A, B, C, D scenarios. Because let's be pretty honest, customers today know that they need to be on S4HANA like in 7-8 years. But so far, these customers are not able to really carve out an architecture for the S4HANA landscape that would replace their ERP landscape. They don't know exactly when specific business processes might be reflected in S4HANA. So they look into a journey that can take them another 5 to 6 years, 7 years eventually. And so these customers often decide then to move their existing NetWeaver-based applications into Azure as well, because hardware is expiring on them, services contracts are due to hardware and infrastructure. And on the side, other applications in the same company are moving into Azure already. So the existing SAP footprint moves into Azure. Additionally, all the new S4 HANA business or all the S4 HANA systems are going to be deployed in Azure as well, whether it's brownfield S4 HANA or whether it's greenfield implementations, where the customers re-implement certain business processes and certain functionalities. Now, why is Azure very well equipped for running SAP workloads? From an Azure point of view, we have a huge variety of different virtual machines and solutions for SAP workload. In solutions for SAP workload, I mean HANA large instances, or which we call here HANA as a service for large SAP installations. So you basically start with NetWeaver certified virtual machines that have like 14 gigabyte in size into CPUs. You go up into virtual machines in M series that have 4 terabyte and 128 CPUs, are fully HANA certified. 7 different SKUs of this M series, starting with 192 gigabytes of memory up to 4 terabyte, giving you the widest bandwidth of all virtual machines to run SAP HANA and NetWeaver on. And then we have our HANA large instances, where you can get hardware as a service for up to 24 terabyte or 60 terabyte scale out. So we have the widest variety, the broadest offer on any hyperscale cloud to run SAP HANA, from the smallest development systems up to the largest implementations. Here we go. Just what I said. We are starting here with the VMs, and we go up to 960 CPUs and 20 terabyte with our hardware as a service called HANA Large Instances, fully SAP certified, the whole bandwidth here. In terms of availability, Azure is also the only hyperscale cloud provider that offers you availability SLAs on single virtual machines. There is no other cloud provider that has single VM SLAs. We have it in Azure, single VM SLA, 99.5% availability. Then we have the possibility, or 99.9 actually. Then we have VM SLAs in pairs, or so-called availability sets, where you would provide NetWeaver central services with 2 virtual machines and Inky replication, or you would provide your database with an always-on HANA system replication cluster, which gives you 99.95. And lately we introduced availability zones that even give you a better SLA over 2 or multiple virtual machines of 99.99%. Really a unique SLA offer where Azure is the only one providing that. There is no Amazon, there is no Google Cloud that provides you SLAs like that, especially not single VM SLAs. How do we compare our virtual machines that go up to 4 terabyte with our HANA large instances that go up to 20 terabyte? You see, from an offer point of view, there is an overlap, which is a desired overlap, because there are scenarios like scale out, HANA scale out, that do work more efficiently and better on HANA large instances than they are working on virtual machines at this point in time. But matter of fact, you would deploy most of the scenarios up to 4 terabyte on virtual machines, and then if you need more than 4 terabyte of memory for your scale-up HANA implementation, you would go to HANA large instances. Might be.
Yeah, so one of the things, obviously, we were looking at cost, and so why, how do we think about that? So one of the fundamental parts of it is you don't think about running it in the cloud the way you think about it doing on-premise. Why are we showing you this range of VMs and range of machines is you get to choose that. Both from the concept of your environments have you may have very different profiles on them in terms of the sizes, but you can also alter those sizes essentially in flight, which means I can stop the machine and size it up because I have more load on it, because the system's getting bigger, and those things. That changes the cost profile that you simply could not do on premise. You would normally commit to a standardized set of hardware across the entire fleet that you had, and that was what you would implement. It would be very difficult to stand up additional type application servers. So that is one principle of how that cost-effective model can come in, is by simply varying the cost, or varying the model and sizing of the VMs, and flexing the size or the amount that are running at any given point. And again, to Jürgen's point, our clear view is to have bigger and bigger VMs. That is the clear direction. But HANA has certain specific characteristics that don't allow us to have 24 terabyte VMs, 1,000 core machines quite yet. It will happen. And so as we create that, we want to create a path that's essentially seamless for our customers to move across that. And so certainly what you would have to do on premise is you're going to bet on something for 3 to 5 years. What we're seeing now is customers who started the journey on large instance, in fact we were just with one now, who is now saying, look, as we evolve into bigger VMs, we're going to migrate those onto the VMs in there. So over that course, that's something they simply couldn't have done. On premise is to change that model essentially over time at a much more reduced rate.
There you go. So indeed, what we just talked about, the strategy that we have around SAP HANA is that the middleware layer, the SAP application layer, always will run on virtual machines in Azure. And different to the sizes or different to the workload scenario, SAP HANA scale out versus scale up versus the memory, you either use Azure virtual machines that will be ever growing in sizes. You might have seen yesterday we released a blog on Azure blogs where we basically announced that we will have VMs up to 12 terabyte. Well, we didn't put a point to it yet, point in time to it yet, but we are working on the engineering of these virtual machines at the moment. So it's an ever-increasing size of VMs, and then if the VMs do not fit either the memory demand or the exact workload scenario, scale up versus scale out, you have HANA large instances where we are offering the maximum that SAP at the moment does support on Intel-based hardware, which is machines up to 960 CPUs and up to 24 terabytes. This thing is, here we go. And so basically, when we look at what we have as an offer for HANA certified virtual machines or hardware, you're looking at the largest offer any one of the providers has here. We even start with 128 gigabyte for Business One. It's also an area where we will see more certifications happening over the next 3-4 months. And then you see our virtual machines that are showing up. And we actually, since this is an old screenshot, there are some more. Yesterday we added 3 more virtual machines that are HANA supported, with virtual machines of 192 gigabyte, 256 and 512 gigabytes of memory. And then you see our S-series or our HANA large instances, which is the hardware as a service. Everything fully supported by SAP certified for SAP HANA to run HANA workloads of tremendous size. Also from a certification point of view, huge variety in operating systems and databases that you have available. Talking about Linux, talking about Red Hat. For Oracle specific, we do support Oracle Linux. We do have customers that deployed on Oracle Linux already very successfully with Oracle in Azure. No doubt about the T-Rex and the Live Cache and this stuff. SAP Business Objects, including data services, fully supported on Azure as well. Very important to note for SAP data services and business objects, these products can leverage Azure PaaS services as well. PaaS services like Azure Data Warehouse or Azure Data Lake Storage can be used by SAP data services of business objects as well. NetWeaver, we all know already, fully supported. SAP Business One supported on SQL Server, and you'll see in the next slide as well on HANA. Of the virtual machine series, I didn't count it anymore. I stopped counting. I guesstimate we are around 50 different virtual machines that meanwhile are SAP NetWeaver certified. It's around that. I mean, it's a tremendous spread and capabilities that you have there, starting with 2 CPUs, 14 gigabyte, going up to 4 terabyte, 128. So huge and tremendous offer there that you have. And then for the HANA support, as mentioned, we have as you can imagine, HANA Developer Edition supported on all kinds of virtual machines, on SUSE Linux. Business One on HANA, we have a support as well. That's an area where you will see more variation coming in over the next 3-4 months, as we will go up with virtual machines that are supported that where we can achieve 100, 150 users for Business One. S4HANA, well, fully supported on our M series with 7 different virtual machines, plus our HANA large instances. Same is true for Business Suite, HANA Platform Edition of BW as well. Operating systems, obviously, for HANA, SLES and Red Hat, also fully supported on Azure virtual machines as well as on HANA large instances. What do we have on customers? Now we look at one customer who decided 2 years ago to move their complete SAP landscape into Azure. And I mean, Rio Tinto is not exactly a small company. You all know Rio Tinto, the name, and we are not looking at a little branch of Rio Tinto. We are looking on the full deal. The Rio Tinto SAP landscape was running in was hosted by an SI partner on DB2 on AIX, and they decided to completely modernize the whole thing and to give up on the hosting, because a lot of the company's assets were moving into Azure already. And so they decided to move from DB2 into Windows and SQL Server with all their SAP systems. So you look at 10 production systems with a whole number of non-production systems. This was done 2 years ago in a process that took us 2-3 waves in order to get the non-production systems into production system. These ECC and ERP systems, these BW systems are all in the size of 10 terabyte, 12 terabyte in volume, are running on Azure VMs and are very successful. Since 2 years, Rio Tinto is in production with the complete SAP landscape on Azure down in Australia, in our Australian data centers in Sydney and Melbourne. Another customers we had, you mentioned
Coats.
Mosaic.
Yeah. So the Mosaic company, which was one of the first ones, which we moved from an Oracle system up to actually a Windows SQL. So you see a lot of Windows SQL. Now, one of the things that we want to get across here is it isn't all HANA yet. HANA plays a key part of this, but we're moving a lot of companies onto SQL as part of that journey, and a lot of them coming off Oracle to actually remove the Oracle costs on that, simplify it, and then actually implement. And what you're seeing is, if you've been in the SAPs for a fair enough time, we've both been 20 plus years doing this. It always used to be the same. It was a single OS, a single DB. I could essentially look at any SAP system and draw it out. Today, that blending of it may have ASE, it may have Suite on HANA, it may have HANA, it may have SQL, is actually very common. In fact, having different OSs for the application servers, we see Windows application servers and HANA, SUSE or Red Hat for the DB is becoming common practice, because the ease of implementation and then managing that allows me to have theoretically more complex management systems, but the benefits of flexibility and the cost come out of that. And that's something we've seen with Mosaic. We're also doing that with Coats, which is another one that has moved their entire on-premise and their entire production system now operating. And that's one of the big things that we've changed. A few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it was about test dev. In fact, again, go back to Mosaic, when we first spoke to them, the biggest machine we could run is 1,500 SAPs. The machines we have here probably exceed 800
130 plus.
Yeah. So
Okay.
135,000 on that, and then our big HANA systems are 800,000 SAP. So where we've come in 3 years means that there isn't really a workload we can't operate and run on Azure today. That's the key part. And so that bet that was made 3 years ago is now, it has paid off handsomely for them. And we're now seeing customers that are, their end result architectures may cost 50% of the operating cost that they were running previously. And so, you know, we've done work with, obviously, we've got Accenture, Accenture CIO, public references, Rio Tinto, we've been doing work with Coca-Cola or public references, so big companies, not small, but actually moving their production instances onto Azure.
Yep.
So with that, any questions?
Jürgen, the M28,
Yes.
is that available in a scale-out architecture as well?
Yeah.
So the question is whether our M128 VM SKU is available or certified for SAP HANA scale-out scenarios. Not yet. I expect it to be certified in July. We are working on the scale-out. We did most of the testing already. It's we needed to mix a little bit in priorities, so that got a little bit on the back burner. But we are working again on it, and it's probably taking us another 3 weeks to have it all together for SAP to certify.
And the M28MS, the M28MS?
The 128MS?
Yeah, it's theoretically it's only OLAP up to 2 terabyte, but as customer-specific sizing project, it can be used and leveraged fully in terms of memory. You know, the TDI V5 thing applies to a degree also to our VMs. So if you as a customer or a partner have the feeling that with OLAP workload that the CPU is so underwhelmed that you could add more load to add more data to it, you can work with SAP in order to have SAP agreeing to the fact that you can use the full 4 terabyte for that VM for OLAP workload as well.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.